Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast, where I give you practical Stoic advice for modern times. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/Simon Drew. I also do one-on-one mindset coaching, and you can book in your first free consultation by going to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching. On Facebook, you can join my group, the Practical Stoic Mastermind. But for now, enjoy this episode. Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast. And today we have a very special guest, somebody else who is within the Stoic podcast sphere, and his name is Justin Vacula, and many of you will know his podcast. It's called the Stoic Solutions Podcast, and so I'm really excited to have him on here today to have a really great conversation with him. And so I'll give you a little bit of background about Justin. So he serves as a counselor and training intern in a school-based behavioral health program while studying clinical mental health counseling at Marywood University in Scranton, PA. He received his bachelor's degrees in philosophy and psychology, a minor in professional writing, and the distinguished W.A. Kilburn Memorial Award for Philosophy from King's College in Wilkes-Barre. In Pennsylvania. And I hope that I'm pronouncing all of these names correctly. And so he's appeared on and hosted various radio shows and podcasts. He's participated in formal debates and discussions, and he was the guest speaker for college-level courses and was featured in local, national, and international news. He's been invited to speak at various national, local, and statewide events, and he's engaged in a good deal of activism surrounding separation of church and state, and has hosted monthly Stoic discussion groups for the Humanist Association of Greater Philadelphia. So there you have it, a little bit about Justin. Wow, he is a busy, busy person, and I was so grateful that he had time to come onto the show today and share his own Stoic journey with us, and I'm really excited. I hope that you guys go and listen to his podcast as well. I've included all the links in the show notes, but without further ado, I present to you Justin Vacula. All right, so Justin, I'm so excited to have you on the show. I know that you're a big influencer out there in terms of being another podcast host where you talk about Stoicism often, and it's a big part of your life. But, I've told everybody a little bit about you, but why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Oh, first, thanks for having me on, and thanks for your content as well, as your podcast is one of the top in my podcast feeds. Listening to new episodes, the interviews that you have. So thanks for contributing as well.
No, I appreciate it. I'd love to be here. So yeah, what's going on in the life of Justin right now?
Good. I'm currently studying clinical mental health counseling at Marywood University in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I'm working as an intern at the tail end of my master's degree. I'm working with students in elementary school. So that's students ages around 4, 5, and 6 to 12, 13, sometimes even 14. They're part of a behavioral health team in an elementary school I work at with school administrators, staff, mental health professionals, behavioral health workers. It's a collaborative effort to aid kids throughout the day, work with their families, be with them in the community and the school. Students face several mental health and behavioral challenges that present at school and at home. So we work with the kids to try to get them through those difficult times and provide support.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm really excited to keep on talking about that as we go through today, because I think that it's so cool that you're so interested in Stoicism, and I know that will actually play into your counseling that you do at these schools as well. So I want to talk about that later on as well. But I guess I wanted to start with, all the way back at the beginning. When were you first introduced to Stoicism, and what kind of made it stick with you?
I've been interested in philosophy since undergrad education, where I had to take a core class as part of the psychology degree that I was pursuing. I had a class titled Ethics and the Good Life. From there, I had a lot of interest in philosophy. There were also some discussions on campus, which happened to be a Catholic college, talking about atheism. Does God exist? What are the arguments for and against God's existence? I'd attended a lot of these discussions with campus ministry that was on campus with the philosophy club on campus and started to question my Christian upbringing. Found philosophy, started to get really interested in that. Eventually happened upon the Rationally Speaking podcast that was formerly co-hosted by Massimo Pigliucci, who's another influencer in Stoic community today. He had talked about Stoicism on a podcast. I hadn't done anything with it at the time. Maybe thought a little bit about the episode, looked into it very briefly, but it was years later where I was listening to a poker podcast, the Thinking Poker podcast, where they mentioned that the work of Epictetus could be very helpful for poker players. So I bought my copy of his handbook, the Enchiridion, and saw, wow, there are a lot of parallels between Stoic philosophy and poker. So I started to read more, started to apply many Stoic ideas at the tables.
Yeah, I love that. And, I was going to get into this later on in the show because I know that you do play poker often, but Stoicism and poker, what's the link there? How does Epictetus help to play a better poker game?
Well, it's mainly focused not on the strategy of, oh, this is what you should do with pocket aces or Jack 10 suited or anything like that. It's not so much the technical game, but rather the mental game. I think it's a very important part of poker, as I'm sure that many people who aren't themselves poker players know at least about tilt, or they've heard the phrase before where people generally get very upset and they end up making huge mistakes and losing money. We don't only see it in poker, we see it in professional sports like golf. Phil Mickelson in the U.S. Open, people were speculating, well, why is it that he hit the ball an additional time as it was moving? Did he get angry? Or we hear of NBA players breaking their hands, punching walls. They make all this money, and what's going on there? Why would they do something like that, right? Or getting in fights and getting fined. So Stoicism, I think, really helps with the mental aspect of the game. How are you to deal with changes? How are you to deal with the inevitable ups and downs of chance? There's lots of talk in Stoicism about games, life being compared to games. And one of my favorite Epictetus passages is talking about imitating those who play at dice, that the counters are indifferent, the results are indifferent, we don't have control over them, but what we can have control over is how we react and how we respond, so we can apply ourselves in life with the skill that we can use regardless of what the outcomes happen to be.
Yeah, I love that. That's so interesting to me, and something that I find I think that one of the reasons why Stoicism is such a beautiful philosophy is because it can really slot into any area of our life. Like, I never would have thought, okay, Stoicism can influence the way that you play poker, for example. But that's the nature of this philosophy, is it's so valuable for every area of our life, for everything that we're doing. I mean, I recently, as you know, because you contributed to this episode, but I did the Wednesday podcast where I was talking about which hobbies or activities do you do in your life that enhance your Stoic experience. And it goes the same way, as in, like, how can Stoicism, like, influence every single activity in your life? It just can, and it does. So that's so cool that you had that. I was wondering if I could go back to your kind of journey with Christianity, because I don't often talk about religion on this show, but I don't believe that there is one right way for everybody, and I encourage people, whatever you practice, whatever is your religion, your philosophy of life, as long as you practice it, that's the best, and as long as you are dedicated to that, and you know about it, and you know what's right and you know what's wrong. So I have no stake in the game there, but what I do believe in is people growing up and questioning where their beliefs came from, and really coming to understand that most of what we believe when we're growing up is given to us, and then it's our responsibility to actually decide what we believe in ourselves. And I feel like what you said earlier alluded to the idea that maybe you did that when you were younger, so you kind of started questioning things. What was the process there for you? Like, what made you decide if you did decide this, that most of my beliefs are actually given to me now. It's my chance to question things and come up with my own conclusions about life.
Right. I don't think I was incredibly reflective of the tradition itself when I was growing up. Well, I went through the motions, I went through the Sunday masses, the sacraments, and it just happened to be sort of a birthright or a familial thing. Oh, well, you were brought into this tradition, this is what's right. But there was never any question, or there was never any discussion about, well, these are the reasons we believe what we believe. It was more of, well, we just have faith. This is a tradition. It feels good. It looks good to us, kind of like a pragmatic thing in a way, but not much discussion about, well, what's the evidence here? What's the reason? What are the arguments for the belief? So I started to question that, and well, there are a lot of different perspectives. Different people have different thoughts on religion. People are non-religious, so what's right here? Not everyone can be right. Someone has to be wrong in the matter, right? If we're talking about actual truths that exist, does God exist? If we're defining that as some sort of supernatural being, there's this certain structure in the universe, this divine creator, right? There are a lot of definitions that people use. For me, it was the question of what makes life meaningful that really led me down a path of questioning. And one specific question in the philosophy class was something about, can a person who has no religious belief still find meaning in life? And at the time, as a believer, I had argued that I think the meaning can be a subjective thing, that people can find all sorts of reasons to consider life valuable, picking their own paths, pursuing their own journey in life.
Yeah, okay. So you kind of decided that's what the meaning of life was, like that you could pick your own, essentially. Is that what you're saying?
Right, as long as you're contributing toward, and perhaps this is where Stoicism comes in, some sort of societal good. What is the purpose of this? It would seem to be a sorry existence, just counting grains of sand on a beach for the rest of your life, right? Is that really going to amount to anything? Are we able to test ourselves, improve ourselves, help others? At the same time, there's this question people would ask, whether it's in middle age, old age, what am I doing with my life? Am I experiencing fulfillment for all of the unhappiness that's out there, even though our modern society seems to be pretty good compared to how it was back in ancient Greece and Rome, right? We have technology, we have better food sources, we have all sorts of modern inventions that we think can help us live a better life. But yet people still aren't satisfied. There's something wrong there. There's some sort of disconnect. Is the current society really helping people to attain this meaningful life? Are they thinking about it in the right way? If it's something of fleeting pleasures or materialistic concerns and not finding a sense of fulfillment or meaning in their lives, there might be a problem there.
Yeah. No, I love that. And, I've often thought that, so we look at something like existentialism that says, nothing really has meaning. There is no meaning to this existence. And then I've often felt like Stoicism comes along and says, listen, it does have meaning, but the meaning is what you give it. Like, what is your purpose here? What is your duty on this earth? Like, what are you going to contribute? That's the meaning of life. And I think that that's such a beautiful and such an empowering philosophy to live by. And, it's one of the reasons why I feel like Stoicism, when it comes to religion, it can fit in with so many different religions, in my opinion. Like, it's kind of, in my opinion, it's a chameleon philosophy in that you see people who are heavy Republicans who consider themselves to be followers of Stoicism. Then there's heavy Democrats who consider themselves to be Stoics. There's Christians. There's everybody. The full spectrum of life. People are following this philosophy, and because it just teaches us to live a good life, to live by our duty, to contribute meaningfully to this earth, and I think that's really powerful. But I'd like to talk about your podcast. So, when did you first decide to start this podcast, and what do you feel like has been the most rewarding aspect of putting out this content?
After finishing the original books, Epictetus' Handbook, Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and Seneca's Letters, I decided to start creating some YouTube videos and sharing my thoughts with others, as I found the topic to be really interesting. And at the time, I was looking for a different hobby, something else to do. I was also regularly attending events with an organization, the Humanist Association of Greater Philadelphia, and they had asked me to give a talk at an event. So I was thinking, well, I think Stoicism can be a really good fit for that. But instead of giving a talk, at least initially, I decided to host a discussion group. So about a dozen people would come once a month and talk about topics that I would pick, such as friendship, finding meaning in life, death with dignity. So I would talk about Stoic perspective on many of these issues. And I got really good feedback from the participants. We would have a lot of chat, and people would even confess that, oh, well, maybe I hadn't thought about these ideas really deeply, and I should really start reconsidering the commitments I make in my social life, the friends I have, the way I use my time, this theme of shortness of life in Stoicism. People were really interested, so I decided, okay, well, let's take this a step further and produce some podcast episodes and give a more professional finish for the matter and get the message out to more people.
Yeah, awesome. And what's been so for example, when I'm doing this podcast, I think that the thing that keeps me going with it is hearing from people who, maybe they've been dealing with depression, maybe they've been dealing with heaps of anxiety, and they message me and they say, listen, you've introduced me to Stoicism. I had no idea about this philosophy so far, and then I started reading, and then I started putting these principles into action in my life, and things are turning around for me. So that's like what keeps me going with this podcast. And so I was wondering, it might be a similar thing for you, but what's been the most rewarding aspect of actually putting this content out there?
In some ways, the episodes have been a personal journey, and I'm broadcasting to the world my thoughts on certain matters, sometimes talking about current events, recent events in my life that I found to be significant. Some people would request topics, or I would find something in the news that seemed to be interesting, something to talk about, or a chapter that I read. So that gave me motivations. Oh, well, here's a spot where I can put my thoughts together and share those with others and get feedback at the same time. So I started to hear those testimonials as well. And people would ask, oh, well, what's your perspective on this? So instead of writing a long drawn out blog post or Facebook comments and typing it again and again, oh, here's this episode. Here's my thoughts on this. Let me know what you think. And there's some correspondence that happens and some online friendships or even in-person interactions that have happened over the past few months have been pretty rewarding. Also, in working with the students, sometimes I would think about an issue during the day and, oh, well, what would the Stoics have to say on this? How are we to tackle this issue? What kind of perspective can we take? And using these podcasts in some way as a framework to talk about some of the issues and what could be the response to things like anxiety, desolation, friendship, loneliness, these concerns, these common questions that people have today.
Yeah, I really like that you're kind of approaching it as a personal journey as well. And we're very similar like that. Like when I started my podcast, it was as much as I wanted to teach, I also wanted to learn. It was something that I knew that as I taught, I would also be learning so much more. It was a personal journey for me, and I'm hearing that with you as well. And I guess I'd like to know, what do you think have been the biggest changes that you've seen in yourself since you've started studying this philosophy?
I've been hearing a lot of feedback from people about, oh, wow, you seem so calm. That, oh, well, they talk at the poker tables. Oh, I've seen you lose these big hands and you don't even bat an eye. It's like it's nothing for you. And, oh, I wish I could be like that. I hear that from people like, oh, you get along so well with things. And I've never seen you upset, or I never see you getting angry. Things like that I hear about. So that's been keeping that constancy of mind, that inner contentment, that tranquility, and really questioning some social commitments as well, as I've alluded to earlier, and how am I using my free time? I found this podcast to be a worthwhile enterprise and focusing on some of my own projects, where over the years people would reach out and you would arrange, oh, let's do this, let's do that, but then there was no follow-up, or people cancel, and you start to reevaluate some of those positions and how much time am I putting in, even in some cases questioning relationships with family members and saying, well, is this a good situation for me to be in? Where can I set boundaries? Let's reevaluate those commitments that we've made. And that's what Stoicism calls us to do. As you mentioned earlier, there's this theme of questioning the wisdom of the crowds, common ideas that people have, and really just taking an audit to your entire life and saying, well, am I functioning well here? What can I do to improve? How can I better help others? How can I better use my time? There's that concern about self-improvement, and in improving ourselves, we can help benefit others in the world.
Yeah, it's so true. And I really do think that this philosophy, Stoicism, can help us to get a better grasp of just how important our time is, which is what I'm hearing from you here. Like, understanding that we might not even have one more day to live on this earth, and so we need to live today to the best of our abilities and do the best that we can, and make the best decisions. And I completely agree. I feel very similarly that in my own life. I even think of Seneca's on the shortness of life, where he says that it's not how much life we have, but it's how well you live it. That's what matters. And you really do question relationships with people. You question where you're spending your time, what sort of social commitments you're making, and it's kind of like, I feel like it's like that 80-20 analysis of your life. What is the 20% of your life that is leading to 80% of your happiness? Now, what can I cut out after that? What can I get rid of so that 80% of my life is bringing me like all this happiness? So I love that. And so speaking of making these different decisions with our lives and kind of looking at what's important, what's not. I know that you've recently, maybe not so recently, but you've been working on a mostly vegan diet.
Yep.
And I know that this is something that, Seneca was a vegetarian for a while, and then Musonius Rufus highly recommended not eating meat. And I like to talk about the diets that people are on this podcast, because I think it's good to get different perspectives. I feel like diets are kind of like philosophies. There's all these different diets around that are all very positive. What's been the most positive aspect of going on a vegan diet, and maybe talk about your journey with it? Like, why did you choose to go on it, and what's it been influencing you with so far?
Right. For me, I would think that my ideas concerning food were very much a habit, a product of my upbringing. And, look, this might taste good, this might smell good, so just eat, and who really cares? It's prepared. Oh, this is what we made for you. Go ahead and eat it. And going out to eat, eating fast foods, stuff like that. There wasn't much thought on my end until, once again, undergraduate education, where I started to question even ideas on food with this ethics class, with some other readings that I had at the time. So college was a great time to start making changes in the diet, and that the food was made for me, right? So I can specifically select what I want to eat. I can have control over that, rather than, I don't have much money, I'm just going to eat like hot dogs, macaroni and cheese, and ramen, that kind of diet like that. People would say like, I eat pasta and I'm a vegetarian, but not quite the healthiest way to go about things. So having a fuller diet and some health concerns. So gradually I removed meat, removed seafood, removed animal products, and now it's almost exclusively vegan. Sometimes I might slip in there with some salad dressings or things that are added to food that I don't quite know about. So I say mostly. And for breakfast, it's usually a pea protein shake with oatmeal, peanut butter, and a banana. Make that using a blender bottle. It's pretty simple. Lunch is usually a meal replacement drink, a Soylent meal replacement drink. It's powder water in a bottle, mix it up, and eat an apple, and I'm good to go. And dinner is usually something I make with my rice cooker. I have brown rice with quinoa, and the steamer tray has tofu, carrots, and mushrooms. And I'm pretty happy with that. I also have supplements in the morning, vitamin B12, iron supplements, and munch on nuts throughout the day, mainly. So I've been pretty happy with that. It's been pretty stable for a few months. And sometimes people say, oh, you're pretty hardcore, or that sounds boring. I get this feedback a lot, and people talk about how much they like certain foods. I even said about this to someone else. He was talking about how he was really upset because he wanted to take his wife out to a steakhouse, but the casino he was in at the moment didn't have a steakhouse. And he said, I just wanted to go and eat a nice meal and I go out and I spend $300 and, I take my wife out for a good meal. And I've really questioned what does this mean good when we're talking about food? I think talking about pleasure, but not talking about what makes an ethical choice, what makes you healthy, what is more frugal in this case.
Yeah, and so I guess I'm hearing that it is more of an ethical choice for you, and is that right?
That's a part of it. I think it's the health benefit. I think it's the ethical considerations, and I think it's environmental considerations as well. And even if you just do it for one, I think that's pretty good to reduce your carbon footprint, to reduce your impact on the earth, right?
Yeah.
And to not be adding a lot of unhealthy foods to your body, which often come about with the standard American diet.
And, this is what I've been finding really fascinating about vegan and vegetarian diets lately is really, there's no way around it. It is really the best way to reduce your impact on this earth. And, people will say, well, you're still using the land for the vegetables that you're eating, and you're still killing animals because when they churn up the vegetables on the land, you're killing rats and everything. But that, in my mind, isn't really a very clever argument, because you're still having a lesser impact on this planet than somebody who eats the vegetables as much as you do and also eats meat. So it's still a very positive thing, and it's something that I think can only be a positive thing. Like no matter what diet you're on, look, as long as you feel good about the choice, and as long as you're actually moving forward, getting healthier, and you feel like it's contributing positively to your life, I think that's great. So, I'm just always interested to hear about why people are on certain diets and how it's impacting your life. So I'm glad that we could talk about that.
And on that point, I don't think there's going to be a totally harm-free solution, right?
Exactly.
Because something has to transport the food. There has to be some costs, right? And who was making the food? Are those workers being paid a fair wage, right? There are a lot of these questions. We could keep going on and on about that, but if you compare side by side, well, which is going to have the least amount of harm, which is going to have the most healthy outcomes, right? We can look at it as a case-to-case thing. So if we could even reduce harm and say, oh, well, I'll take meat out of my diet every week or every few days, or I won't go and go to that factory farm or eat KFC or something, and maybe I'll go to a more local place like free range or local farm places have been pretty popular lately. So reducing it in some way. You're not going to make a complete change, radically just replace everything overnight. You can make some gradual steps at it. We want to be realistic. And that's one thing with Stoicism, to not be too hard on ourselves and realize that progress can be a gradual thing. Rather, if we set the bar too high to begin with, we're likely to fail and then just give up.
And that's where the moderation part of Stoicism does come in, no matter what you're doing, just let's practice some moderation. You don't have to be an activist on the front line, waving pickets around, telling people not to eat meat. You could just, live a good life and eat your diet the way that you want to and make those small changes. But I do really think that it's a positive thing, even as you said, if you just were to cut out meat a couple of days a week or something like that, just to reduce your impact on this earth in a small way. And I can just hear people all over the place getting angry right now that we're even talking about the vegan diet. So,
that's a possibility. Any of these topics, really, they're just common topics, and people are going to be maybe on one extreme or another, or they're
that's
going
it.
to, it just happens with conversations, and that's okay. But hopefully we can have productive conversations and consider the issues at hand. And it's not saying, oh, you're a terrible person because you eat this or don't eat this or anything like that, right? So being judgmental like that isn't going to help the conversation.
Exactly. I think it's so funny, if we were talking about an all-meat diet here, and I've had people on the podcast who are on completely carnivore diets. I know there would be many people out there who would get angry at that. And I've had other people on here who are on vegan diets and vegetarian diets, and I know there are people who get angry at that. There is no pleasing everybody, but there is no one exact right solution, and it's good to talk about all this. But
Right.
I was wondering if I could go right back to something that you said at the start. So you said the title of your philosophy class, was it Philosophy and the Good Life? Am I getting that right?
Ethics and the Good Life.
Ethics and the Good Life, that's it. So obviously, my website is called Rise to the Good Life. I feel like it kind of represents, that we're always trying to rise to that next level in our lives, trying to be better than we were before, trying to make ourselves the best possible versions of ourselves that we can be. I was wondering, when we talk about the good life, it's also been used in Stoic terms as well. I know that people have written books. For example, William B. Irvine, wrote a guide to the good life. That's it.
Yeah.
What is the good life to you? Like, what do you define as the good life? I know it's such a difficult question. This is like, what's the meaning of life? But for you, what is it?
Yeah, it's having a sense of personal fulfillment, being generally content about things, having the bases covered, having good social relationships, being free from tremendous worry or anxiety or calamities, which really happen to make life more difficult. The Stoics often ask, what must be traded for what? And we could really look at our life and how we organize, if we even do organize, and think about what our priorities are. Are we spending our time well to achieve goals that we want? Are we structuring our lives in such a way that we can experience success? Are we really making the most of day and still having a good amount of leisure as well, some personal hobbies, some personal interests? Are we generally happy? And if we're not, well, what can we do to change that? If we're overall unhappy about things, then Stoicism, I think, can really help us get in the right direction, to really lead us to self-reflect, to be aware of our thoughts and feelings, and try to get along, even to reach out to others and find some solutions, as my podcast says, right? The Stoic Solutions podcast, looking for ways to improve our quality of life. And also, as we've talked about others too, this idea of altruism, helping others, or circles of concern. You've talked about that with Kai Whiting and some other guests, right? We can benefit others as well, rather than just secluding ourselves and just really not contributing much to social welfare or societal good.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a pretty good definition of the good life. Absolutely.
I think it might be a start.
It's definitely
I
a start.
Really, find myself just if some thought experiment were to happen, and you can push this button and you'll receive like some minimum standard of living and just lay on the couch all day and watch TV. That wouldn't be the life for me. And the Stoics say, well, we need something to test our mettle, to get out there, to participate in society, to learn, to grow, to improve, to be engaged with life, to live an examined life, rather than just kind of unplugging and having this ignorance is bliss mentality, or just being at such a point where we've disliked our lives, or we've had some gripes with society in general, so we're to disengage and be resentful. It's not a direction that I want to go in.
Yeah, definitely. And you talked about earlier, you talked about kind of this freedom from calamity, this freedom from massive obstacles. I kind of feel like Stoicism, okay, so a life without any sort of trial would be absolutely pointless in my view. We have to have these things, as you say, that test us. But I think Stoicism gives us the tools to make us stronger and better, so that when these trials do come, when we're faced with difficult situations in life, which we really need, like exercise, for example, which we can talk about as well, We need that trial, that thing that's going to test us. But Stoicism helps us to be stronger so that it's not necessarily a trial, so that it's something that we can actually get through. And we're able to deal with a lot more than what other people may be able to deal with. I guess I'd like to know what are some things in your life, and exercise might be one of these things, but what are some things in your life that kind of challenge you, that you have to become stronger to get through, like in terms of whether it's trials or working out or something like that?
Mm-hmm. I hear a lot from people talking about being lonely, not really feeling connected to others, expressing being bored, not having genuine connections. So what can people do to be content by themselves? And what can some benefits of loneliness be? And by loneliness, I mean just time spent by ourselves, not this excessive longing for human companionship to the point where we don't really care who that person is, that we're just around someone or just sitting at a table with a phone around people. That's not what I mean, but a fuller interaction. Seneca talks about this a lot in his thoughts on friendship. He talks about people being of two minds, being concerned about the welfare of the other, for what concerns one concerns the other, and to even be greedily enjoy our friends is the phrase that's used in the translation that I have, to really, as you say, make the most of the relationships we have. But so many people, they're complaining about others. I don't like, people will say, oh, I don't like my marriage. I don't like my coworkers. I don't like so-and-so. The neighbors are jerks, right? They'll talk about this and that, and they're just not happy. So, well, what can you do to try to have a stronger foundation? Is it more than, oh, well, this person just lives close to me, or, oh, I've known this person for 2 years, right? To make an inventory of the people we do know and make some choices in our personal relationships. And it can be difficult cutting some people out or walking away, as some people get into a position of just wanting to help others so much that they forget their own wants, and they're giving so much of themselves that other people aren't really contributing to that relationship. Like certain family members, well, so-and-so, they keep messing up, they keep being without a place to live, they go from job to job, and you try to help them, you let them borrow money, but then it's just the same story again and again. And you could have your compassion, but at some point those relationships can drag you down if you allow that to happen.
Yeah. So what do you do to stop that cycle and to get out of that that negative spiral that you're probably sending yourself into, where you're spending too much time focusing on everybody else, and you're not relying on yourself as much for your happiness, and you start to rely on other people? What can you do to get out of that?
I think it's a lot of balance in life that really helps. Self-care is something that's talked a lot about in counseling and even in the working world, to be concerned about your wants, your needs, make some time for yourself, your hobbies, and keeping active. That goes into the exercise component, right? That you can just be at a gym, have some headphones on, listen to your favorite podcasts or music, have your treadmill tunes going, right? And just have some time to kick back a little bit, to not be so concerned about the hustle and bustle, and just be in your own kind of space. And there's a lot of research that I've seen that supports that a lot of exercise improves mental health, that it just is correlated with so many things like satisfaction of life, positive interactions with others, just feeling more alert and awake, right? So even besides the weight loss, there seem to be a lot of mental benefits, mental gain that's to be had from even a simple cardio and weight training workout.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I think, honestly, more people need to start living their lives in a more self-reliant way that Stoicism teaches us to do. I was just listening to Jim Rohn, the public speaker, very popular in the 70s to the 90s, I think. But basically, there's this video that I watch all the time, and something that he says in it is he realized how selfish it is to say, you look after me and I'll look after you. What we should be saying is, I'll look after me and you look after you. Because when everybody looks after themselves, then as you say, we're having better interactions with people, because we're not so stressed out because we're getting all of our happiness from other people and none from ourselves. Then we're more effective. We're more emotionally in tune. If we can all just look after ourselves and make sure that we are self-reliant, we are happy, we are content, we're fulfilled, then we can actually look after people. And you see this all the time with people who spend their entire lives going out there and doing everything for everybody else and saying yes to everything, and then they just get burnt out, and then they can't help people. And you might even see this, with your counseling as well, and I'd like to talk about that as well. But I think that Stoicism is so powerful for that, for just allowing us to say, okay, now is my time. I'm going to look after myself so that I can contribute in the most meaningful way possible.
Yeah, it's a line from the popular Dolly Parton song, Jolene, "My happiness depends on you." I see it as a very grim message, right? That, if this one person doesn't do things the way that I would like, that I have this expectation, I have this desire, and if it's not met, then I'm going to be devastated. That could be a very dangerous situation to be in. And of course, we want things to we would prefer, right, things to go in a certain direction. In so many cases, the Stoics will say, don't have these lofty expectations. Be very careful with your desires, because if you really are focused on an outcome, you really, really, really want it to happen, and then it doesn't go the way that you would like, then yes, that can lead to some mental ruin. So Stoicism can help us be content regardless of what other people are doing, regardless of what is happening in the world. That's the ideal anyway, to make the most of what we have at our disposal.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's so true. And I think that's one of the greatest aspects of this philosophy, is that it does teach us to be self-reliant. And people kind of get scared of that idea. They kind of feel like, well, maybe some of my happiness, maybe it's right that I should be angry at this person for not being like this or for not doing this. It's scary to kind of go off on your own. And people also get scared of this idea of, I'm going to be looking after myself. Isn't that selfish? Isn't it selfish that I would...
They use it as a dirty word.
Exactly, exactly. And it's just not true. It's like I said earlier, if you look after yourself, you will be able to look after other people even better than what you're doing right now. And it's kind of like... This might be the complete wrong example, but I'm going to say it anyway. Something that I really love that I heard from the entrepreneur in America who owns the Dallas Mavericks. What's his name? Oh my gosh, I should know this. Anyway, I really feel bad that I don't know his name, because he's a crazy person. It's absolutely inspirational. But he basically says that. That one of the most patriotic things that you can do in America is to work really, really hard, make a crap load of money, and then pay heaps of taxes to make the country better. And so, that's the whole idea of, okay, work on yourself, become the best that you can be, do the very best, and then you can actually help in a huge way. And it works all the way down to, on a personal level in our lives. But I'd like to go to your counseling now. So obviously you're a counselor in training. You're doing a lot of work there. How does Stoicism impact that area of your life?
I see a lot of overlaps with Stoicism and cognitive behavioral therapy in questioning the thoughts that we have about events and things in the world. What are our opinions about people, about events? What are our values? And is that the right way to look at things? What are some other possible perspectives or interpretations that we can have? That's a very popular theme in Stoicism, thinking about our judgments about the world. It was one of the first chapters in Ward Farnsworth's book. You had him on your podcast. I interviewed him as well, in thinking about, what is that middle step? What is the opinion that we have about this event that can happen? Can we see it in another way? This sort of thing comes up in a lot of the counseling sessions that I have, where, okay, here's a problem in the day that, so-and-so didn't include me in an activity at recess, so that must mean that we're no longer friends, or he was very mean to do that. Okay, can you talk about that? Why is it that you feel that way? So we'll talk about that situation and thoughts about that relationship, that person, what the expectations were, what were some of the events that happened in the day. Say, okay, well, it's great that you're coming here to chat about it, so let's work it out and let's try to make sense of what has happened, and go into a lot of discussion about friendship, about fairness, justice, right? That's a common theme in Stoicism as well. And just being able to work through these with productive responses instead of just impulsively acting on anger that can be very self-destructive, or being nasty to others in response. So we talk about some problem solving. We talk about different ways to interpret and ways to just make the most of the school day, or so many things that are happening throughout the day. This person's being mean, schedule change happened, right? There can be all kinds of things, or family members, what's the home situation? So a lot of things in play. And here the kids get to come to the school-based office for a break if they're maybe frustrated in the classroom, or they're just looking for some time away or to talk about a certain concern. And with other people on my team, we're able to guide them through the day. And also using Stoicism to be patient, to be understanding, to have consideration, compassion for others.
And I guess I'm wondering, do you think that the children that you work with pick up these concepts pretty easily? Like in terms of changing our perspective about what happened, changing the meanings that we apply to each event? Is it something that they kind of understand and grasp pretty easily?
One thing that I have to do, and I've been doing recently, is hosting discussions with families, talking about progress that's made towards certain treatment goals. So rate, well, how has your child been in this dimension? And we can look back and create some graphs, or use the software that creates the graphs for us, and see if there's been some improvements. So I'm able to not only talk with the student or see the behaviors in the office, but also get feedback from the teachers, guidance counselors, whoever is in the home environment, and we can see that progress is made. We're able to give praise to the student, work with the families on effective parenting skills, different ways to respond to concerns, and really work as a team to try to have some better outcomes. So I think that the program is very beneficial in that the students have the support in the schools and at home as well, coordinating with the team. And I think modeling is very common with the kids. They just pick up on habits, different things that people do and say, how they respond, whereas sometimes adults will talk as if no one's listening, but the kids are paying attention in many cases, and we'll often see behaviors that are copied, whereas if a child has a behavior that doesn't seem to be age appropriate, that seems to be not good in the classroom, well, where did they pick that up from? Is that something in the family's past? Is that an example that they've seen in the community?
Yeah, it's kind of like that quote. What is it? Children have never been very good at listening, but they will never fail to imitate. And so, you know, that's why I think it's really awesome that you're actually involving the parents in it and saying, you know, here's the progress and here's kind of what we're teaching. And I genuinely believe that if we, you know, stopped trying to focus on changing children and started trying to focus on changing the adults, you know.
That's part of the puzzle, sure.
Yeah, because, I mean, hey, they might be getting angry in the schoolyard, but you might help them to fix that issue while they're at school, but then they'll go home and they'll see the same bad example that got them there in the first place over and over again. So I think that's definitely a good way to go. And look, I want to be I want to be valuable of your time. I want to be respectful of your time today. And you know, I've really enjoyed having you on the show. I just have one more question.
Sure.
What is it? Is there anything that you think that people misunderstand about Stoicism, and how would you kind of lead them in the right direction?
Right. I think one of the misconceptions, I've talked about this with Massimo Pigliucci when he appeared on my podcast, the misconception is that Stoics are killjoys, that they're saying, oh, reject every source of pleasure in the world and don't show any emotion. What's the point? Oh, just act good for your life, but don't have any fun. That's not what we're advocating here. We're advocating for some moderation, really questioning what it is that we see to be good, to have that good life. All right. That's the theme that we're talking about. Is this going to add to my life? Is this going to enhance things for me? And an excess, too much desire in many cases will lead to negative outcomes. So we're just coming and questioning, is this going to be a good thing for us? Are we using this in a responsible manner? Are we making some good decisions in our lives? What is traded for what? As the Stoics are very keen on the costs of things, trading off time, trading off money, trading some mental dedication and energy.
Yeah, I like that. I love that idea of being mindful of the cost of things, because everything has a cost in our life. Every relationship, every time, every minute spent doing something, every podcast that you listen to, it has a cost, you know?
Sure.
And so hopefully we're providing value here. And I know that in this interview, we've definitely provided enough value for people that will make it worth their time. And look, I want to thank you again, Justin, for coming on my show. This has been a long time coming, and finally we got to do it. But I'm so glad that I could have you on here. It's great to have you as a fellow podcaster and a friend. And where should my listeners go from here? How can they best follow you and become involved in what you're doing?
Thanks. If you go to stoicsolutionspodcast.com, you can see links to my social media podcast. If you just simply search the podcast on iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, or Stitcher, you'll find the Stoic Solutions podcast very easily. So thanks for listening to the podcast. You've made it this far.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And hey, we'll have to have you back another time.
All right, very good. And we'll chat as well for you to be on my show as we grow the Stoic community here.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. All right, thanks, Justin. Have a good day. Ciao. All right, so there you have it, Justin Vacula, and I'm so glad that we had him on the show. He's such an awesome guy and so dedicated to this philosophy in his life. And as you can see, it's really impacting every area of his life, and he's using it with his counseling and, even with his own diet and everything that he's doing. So I love that. And it was awesome to have him on the show, and we'll have him back another time. And you can go to all of the links in the show notes. I've got the links to his website, and you can also support him on Patreon. And please go check it out. And apart from that, I hope that you guys have enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk to you next time. But until then, I hope that this episode has helped you on your rise to the good life. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. I hope it's been valuable for you. And if you'd like to support the show, then you can go to patreon.com/Simon Drew. If you'd like to try mindset coaching with me, then you can book your first free consultation